onion and courgette if we want. Perfect. Right, we need the skewers then.
We were using these tiny little wooden skewers at home, and it's just absolutely daft. You know, why would you put a wooden skewer on a barbecue?
Yeah.
They're very. It's very wasteful. You know, you only use them once, and then they burn, and you throw them away. And I think I made the first skewers almost out of frustration. In fact, the first skewers I ever made, I was going on a camping trip with Rob, and we, normally would just go and have a can of beans and stick it by the fire and a jacket potato and whatever, some sausages. I think this time we thought we were going to make a lovely beef stew and a couple of nice bottles of wine, and we took loads of food. But the morning we were going, we realised we didn't have anything to cook it on, so we had some little, probably 5mm stainless bar, and I just knocked up a couple of skewers, but extra long ones.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, that's a bloody good idea, isn't it? When I first started making skewers, I was absolutely amazed how many we could make, how many we would sell, that people would buy them. I mean, I'm constantly amazed that anyone buys anything we make, because it's such a compliment. We love making the stuff so much ourselves.
Yeah.
It's such a passion that we all have. It is a business, yes, but also we come into work, we're enthused, we want to get on with stuff, we make everything, all the products we make with a kind of a smile on our face. But then for people to come and buy them from us is an even better thing. And in a way, it was the kind of the transition product from being a kind of architectural smith to a kind of more product smith. So I moved from gates, railings, furniture, that kind of thing, through to more home products when I started doing the market, so stuff that people can actually walk away with, like a candlestick or I suppose fire pokers, that kind of thing. But actually I think when the skewers came in, that was a real introduction into the food world, because it is a very, very kind of iconic utensil, if for want of a better word, for cooking with. And through doing that, and through seeing the popularity of the skewers, and through selling so many of them, you start to think of, well, what accompanies a skewer? What else do you want on a barbecue? Yeah. So then I started making barbecue tongs. So then I started making meat forks. Then we made the spatulas, and it is really kind of a foundation product to open up a whole different world. Really, this film, the Skewers film, is definitely about batch production. We make these in quite large batches. I think to date the record is 125 in a day, but that's going some. So normally we make about 75 in a day, and it's a very different sort of sense of mentality or a way of thinking about making products. I mean, we are production smiths, so we make stuff in small batches anyway, but not normally in batches of that size. So you have to kind of switch into machine mode and then you just get on and forge a batch. So it's repetition, repetition, repetition.
It's quite therapeutic.
It's incredibly kind of meditative in a sense.
It really is.
That you just you really have to concentrate on kind of just repeating over and over again what you're doing. Although the danger of that, sometimes you get lost in it. You kind of get a sort of blindness in a way, and you can find you start off making kind of 1-inch tapers, and then they go to 1.5-inch tapers, and then they go to 2-inch tapers, and then you have to kind of bring yourself back. And often when if I'm teaching someone how to do that, you go and check after sort of half a dozen that they've made, and you think that's great, he's got it sus. But then you have to go back and check after like 50, because people do tend to sort of veer off the line and go a bit off piece. We all make things in a very different style, and that's it's quite interesting. It's difficult to see in the film, but when I make a batch, you make a batch, or Joe makes a batch, they do come out very slightly differently. But I think that's something that we quite like. And the fact that you're taking a load of stuff to the market, or if you're selling them, you're not just selling one person's batch. They'll all go into the into the store or whatever, and you get these slight little variances between them, and you can almost pick one out and tell who's made it. We probably can anyway. But that's the beauty in a way of what we do. So although we do batch production and we make kind of runs of things, and we are a product business really, there will always be those differences, and that I think is very nice for customers. I think it's nice for people buying our stuff. That it's not just the same every single time. Each batch is a little bit different. So especially with skewers, each batch of skewers is going to be very slightly different from the batch before, depending on who's made them. But I like that kind of variation in it. I think, I don't know, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, whatever, and this was before I set up the kitchenware business, and I think it's partly why I set up the kitchenware business, because I think I was trying to become like a machine in making a single product over and over again, make it as perfect as you can, and try and make them absolutely identical. And over the period of time, I realised that customers don't necessarily want that for a start. You want that kind of human element, and also you can't make things exactly the same over and over again. In smithing terms, it's in a sense it's easy to make one thing once. The kind of mastery of your art is you can make that one thing over and over again, as similar as possible. They're never going to be identical, but you make it, like you said earlier, within those parameters of what's kind of, in inverted commas, of what's allowed, and then to see that, 100 of whatever, and they all look relatively the same, is a really kind of good feeling. If you look back through the decades and centuries to when there were more production smiths, so the kind of village smith would have had to have made batch productions, and that's more the world that we live in than the kind of art smith, and that has its own place. The artist blacksmith, absolutely amazing, and making incredible one-off creations and beautiful gates and that kind of thing. But it's kind of taking it back a notch to a certain degree, to have that mentality of repetition, trying to reach that kind of perfect thing, knowing you're never going to reach them, never going to make the perfect thing, but kind of once in a while you get a glimpse of it. Well, it's also, there's a kind of, in the film there's a real transition between the making world and the food world, but also in our business there's a real transition between the making world and the food world. So we don't really sit in the blacksmithing world anymore. We sit definitely in the sort of craft and the maker's world, but also we tend to sit even more and more in the food world. I think we did sort of chat about that last time, but this was really our sort of transition product from one to the other. there's a huge similarity between what we do as blacksmiths and what the chefs are doing, and this is the kind of this fusion between food and craft, and ways of producing things. We chatted a bit about it in the last film about making the ladles. Is that a chef, especially a working chef in a kitchen, and maybe not so much executive chefs, but they've got to produce the same dish over and over again, the same quantity, the same look. Each one will be a little bit different, and I'm sure they're constantly trying to search for that kind of essence of the perfect dish. And then they're sending them out to customers, and they've got to do that day in, day out. And it's not necessarily a very sort of glorious job, as in you don't always get the glory for it because it's not the grand, presentation or whatever. But I think there's something kind of quite unique and immensely satisfying about repeating things over and over again, but just trying to get them right every time. Where were we last year? I think at the Good Life we did it, didn't we? So at the Good Life Festival last year, we had forged a whole load of skewers, and then Al had prepped up loads of veg, loads of chicken, lamb, all the different stuff, and the public were coming through, watching us forging, and just making their own skewers. And that it's very interactive, isn't it? So in the film we've got the kids are making their own skewers, Louise and Jazz are making their own. I suppose it's very much one of those kind of products that everyone can get involved in, and it's very kind of collective cooking. One of the main points, especially about something like a skewer, is its longevity. So using wooden skewers is just daft. So you buy a set of skewers, and if you use them, wash them, dry them, look after them, you can use them for years and years and years. And that sums up a lot of our ethos in about we make things, we make them as best as we can, we make them to last as long as possible. And if you're going to spend the money on buying beautiful objects, well-made objects, you want them to last, basically, and to be able to reuse things over and over again. And it is a counterpoint to the throwaway culture.